Hello and welcome back to episode 12, those have gone quickly, of the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast about all things travel. We've talked destinations, we've talked road trips, travel preferences, eating. Today we're talking about one of the most famous, legendary US states. Charlie Bosco here, joined by TT in Denver. We're talking Texas. Does Texas border Colorado? Doesn't Colorado border 8 states? Is that the stat?
I have no idea.
I thought it was. I'm sure it was you.
But I know it doesn't border Texas.
Does it not?
No.
But it's not too far. You're 6 hours to what, Amarillo?
Yes, about 6.5 hours to Amarillo, but you go through New Mexico and like a smidgen of Oklahoma to get there.
I'm sure it was you that told me that Colorado borders 8 states.
It's possible. I don't have a map in front of me, but
okay, we're off to a bit of a shaky.
It's more than one for sure.
We're off to a shaky start. I'm glad this isn't a geography podcast. Luckily, we don't have to know specifically where Texas is. We just know it's kind of at the bottom of America.
Yes,
but I've never been to Texas, so full disclaimer, it's going to be you doing a lot of the talking today. But my understanding of Texas is that it is the state with possibly the strongest feeling of independence and identity. If you're from Texas, not Texan first, but being Texan is a big part of your identity in a way it doesn't seem to be in other states.
I think that's probably fair. I mean, I think everybody from different states tries to feel that way. But because Texas is the only state that was its own country before it became part of the United States, I think they have a different identity. They have the Alamo, which is where they battled for their independence from Mexico. You just don't have that history in other parts of the United States. It was states were either bought or taken, or just people pushing west and taking land. But Texas has a little bit different of a history, and it's such a huge state. I mean, I think it's the 10th biggest economy in the world. If it was a country, so it's and there's always been talk of Texas breaking away and becoming its own country again, and so yeah, I think you're right.
And you just mentioned it's huge. It's by far the biggest state in the lower 48. Alaska, of course, is the biggest U.S. state, but Texas is absolutely enormous. How long does it take to drive across it? 12 hours, something like that?
Oh yeah, it's a good solid day to drive across it. And when Texas came into the United States, there was some kind of agreement that it could be split into multiple states later. And I don't know what the process is for that, but it would never happen because then that would create more senators, and other senators are never going to want that to happen because then it lessens their power. But there is some sort of way that can happen just because it's such a massive amount of land.
Oh, that's interesting, because I know there's long been a push from the Democratic Party, perhaps not for the noblest of reasons, perhaps because it would pretty much guarantee him some more seats, but they want to make District of Columbia be represented at a federal level.
Yes, and they would love to make Puerto Rico a state because that's more liberal. Austin is the one part of Texas that's liberal, so I'm sure they would love to have that be independently represented. But yeah, I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I have to say I do watch the DC getting represented thing with a pretty heavy dose of skepticism, because the Democrats who are pushing so hard for it pretend that it's because it's for democracy and it's the right thing to do. I suspect they wouldn't be pushing quite so hard if it was blood red like Texas.
Now, can you name, speaking of geography, since I don't know what states border Colorado, can you name what countries Texas has fallen under? There's 6 of them.
I thought you were going to ask me which countries BC borders. Wouldn't have taken long.
It's not. Well, the real question would be, what other American states does Canada border?
That's a really good question. BC borders Washington, Idaho, and I think maybe a little bit of Montana, but then maybe that's Alberta. But yeah, countries that Texas has belonged to. Well, Mexico, France.
Yes.
Before the Louisiana Purchase. Spain.
Yes.
Wow, I'm actually really happy with 3. I almost don't want to. I mean, I'll guess Portugal. Portugal had loads of the world. Okay. The Dutch.
No.
No, I'm out. Come on, tell me. That's a great trivia question.
You're really gonna be embarrassed that you didn't guess at least one of these.
England.
The United States of America.
Well, no, that went without saying. I'm claiming that by default.
The Republic of Texas, when it was its own country.
Okay.
And the Confederate States of America.
Okay.
During the Civil War.
Good trivia question.
So when you hear of like Six Flags, the amusement park, that's why it's called Six Flags, is because it came from Texas, and it's those 6 flags that flew over Texas.
Don't you love how I just guessed that England had owned it, seeing as they've owned pretty much everything at one stage? But
yes.
When the United States was a British colony, it didn't include Texas.
It wouldn't have. I think it was probably part of either Mexico or France back then. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's a little bit of Texas history, tiny bit of geography. We listed it's huge, but we're not quite entirely sure where it is in relation to Colorado. Kind of south. Just follow the white arrow on a compass, and you'll end up in Texas.
Yes.
But yeah, you've obviously spent a lot of time there. What are the overall impressions of Don't Mess with Texas?
I've spent a decent amount of time. I've been to Amarillo a handful of times because it's so close to Colorado. You can road trip from there. I've been to Dallas a couple times. I've been to Houston. I've been to Austin a couple times. I actually drove very recently. I drove through Texas on my way back from North Carolina to Denver. I've also driven Denver to South Padre Island, which is a long trip and spent there. So I wouldn't say I'm by any means an expert on Texas, and I'm not from there, but I've probably been to Texas, I don't know, total a dozen times. And even then, it's so huge, I don't really feel like I have a great understanding of it, just because of how large it is. But that's kind of the beauty of America sometimes.
So we've really sold this episode with a geographical mistake up first, me not knowing that Texas was part of the US, and now you're the expert and you're saying you don't know it that well. We're struggling now, many kidding. We know enough, hey?
I'm just a very humble man, Charlie, as you know.
A humble man with much to be humble about, yeah.
Yes.
As Churchill said.
My favorite, it's hard to pick my favorite quality about myself, but if I had to, it'd be my humility.
Yeah, I have the same problem. I used to be big-headed, but now I'm perfect.
So yes, I do love Texas. I was just spent last week in Austin. I think it's a super cool place, and different than other parts of Texas. So I guess where should we start with Texas?
Well, you listed, and people listening to this probably staggered to hear that we actually make notes ahead of these episodes, but we do have notes, and the first place you listed and the first place you mentioned was Amarillo.
Yes.
Now, I mean, everyone is now going to have, is this a way to Amarillo in their head for the rest of the day, so apologies for that, but what is Amarillo like when you found the way there?
You know, it's interesting because it's a lot of Texans don't really consider it Texas because it's kind of right on the corner. It's not the deep Texas. I consider it Texas because it's part of Texas, and when you're there, if you go to make your breakfast at the hotel, the waffle maker is still in the shape of Texas, so to me it's Texas. But a lot of what's there is the Route 66 stuff, and we've kind of talked about this previously in one of our other episodes about road trips. But before the highway system went in America, there was a lot smaller roadways that people would go for road trips, and road trips is a very American thing. And Route 66 went right through Amarillo, Texas, and there's the Cadillac Ranch, or the Cadillacs buried in the desert. There's the big Texan steakhouse that has been on all kinds of TV shows where if you eat the 72-ounce steak or whatever, you get it for free.
72 ounces. I'm just doing the maths on that. It's awful. Imagine. Oh, okay. All right, because we do need to talk about the fact that Texas has one or two overweight people in it. We'll come to it. I'm just trying to picture 72 ounces of steak. All right, sorry.
Yes, and I've been there, and I have not done that. I'd rather just pay for my steak and not be sick for like a week.
Have you seen this? Did you ever see one? The 72 ounce?
Yeah, people do it because it's on like a stage, and people will try to do it, and everyone cheers them on and stuff. If you're ever in that area, that is one of the coolest restaurants in the United States, the Big Texan. It's not crazy expensive. It's so over the top, ridiculous. It's really, really, really fun. I went there on my way back when I drove back last month. I stopped by myself and had dinner there, and they brew their own beer. It's like an awesome, awesome place. That's a place, if you come to Denver and you want to do a road trip sometime, we should road trip down there. It's so fun.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm trying the challenge though.
Yeah, and it's just so ridiculous. Yeah, and you have to eat the steak, and you have to eat like a baked potato, a salad, and like 5 shrimp cocktail or something. I guess the story is back when Amarillo was full of ranchers, they had, that's part of why people that work outside for a living eat, these big meals, because it's just so much work. That's why Eastern Europe, they eat these stews and stuff like that, or these sausages in Germany, and in the United States a lot of it was steak and barbecue and stuff. So back when the restaurant was, I think, fairly young, probably in the 40s or 50s, ranch hand came in and he ate 72 ounces worth of steak, a baked potato, a side salad, and like 5 shrimp. And the owner said, from now on, anybody that can do that gets to eat for free.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's been that way ever since. So, yeah.
So Amarillo's it's not a big town, hey, but it's fun.
It's not, and it's fun. It's got some cool stuff. It's got like a little zoo that's like super cheap to get into. That's neat. It's got one of the coolest things it has there is it sounds kind of dumb, but it's really neat, and it's an RV museum. And it's like in the back of this massive complex that sells RVs, but it's basically like the owner of this company's private collection of vintage RVs. And it's all these RVs from like the 40s and 50s. And you can go in a lot of them and look around. And it is really, really cool because not many of those things survived. Like people don't still really use a lot of them. And then there's old motorcycles and all kinds of stuff that he collected over the years. It's really well done and it's free.
That sounds fun. I mean, I just immediately think of Breaking Bad.
Yes, it's a little probably nicer than that.
I just imagine in the desert cooking meth. But
yeah, I love Amarillo. The hotels aren't super expensive. Food is really good. Yeah, I think that's a great place to go and a great road trip. Now, if I lived in New York, would I fly to Amarillo on a vacation? I don't know. But if you're somewhere that you can go through it, I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, but that's the nature of travel. If I have my list of places I'm willing to spend my life savings on to go to, it's pretty small. If it's places you're willing to spend a few bucks on to go, it's a bit bigger. But life's full of these places where, if you're in the region, they're super fun. But you might not want to. You might not want to make it the trip of a lifetime.
Yes, exactly. So, moving on from there, what was my next one? I said doesn't matter.
We got Dallas.
Oh, Dallas. I have not spent a ton of time in Dallas. But I have been there and gone to Six Flags over Texas, which is the original Six Flags. I took my sons there. It's really cool. I think that's worth it going for there. Dallas is really known too for steaks and food. I actually would like to go back to Dallas and do some more stuff, but when I went there, it was more kid stuff than probably stuff I would do now.
I've always wanted to go and see the JFK assassination site.
Oh, I did that.
It just I feel like it's one of those places where you'd get there and immediately know it because you've seen it so many times.
I actually forgot about that now that you mentioned it. A few years ago, I went because it's Dallas-Fort Worth. They're kind of by side, and I went to the Fort Worth like rodeo, stock show type thing, and I was so out of place. Oh my god! Like, but. It was really fun walking around. We have stock show in Denver, so I'm not used to it, but that was a really cool trip. Fort Worth actually has a very nice art museum. It has like a Caravaggio and stuff in it, which super surprised me. So when I was in Fort Worth, I went to the JFK site and saw where the CIA killed him.
Oh.
No, just kidding. I don't know. But you can see they have like an X on the street where he was shot. You can see the grassy knoll or whatever, and the window,
the book depository.
Yeah, it's neat. It's super neat, and walking around there is cool. There's all kinds of there's this giant eyeball statue that's well known. That was actually a really fun day, and I think anyone that's in American history would like to see that.
Are people not constantly nearly getting run over because they go and stand on the X in the middle of the road?
There actually was more people wandering around that area than I expected.
Oh, I imagine it'd be busy with people. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of one of the defining historical moments of the last 50, well, it's more than 50 years, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'd really like to check that out. It's I'm slightly worried that the CIA are now kind of onto us after your comments, but then I thought, well, I'll take the listeners. If it gets us some downloads.
I heard the CIA all got laid off.
Yeah, that's true. Actually,
there's no federal government anymore.
I'll keep an eye on the download stats. If we get a big peak in Langley, Virginia, then maybe we should get worried. I mean, the other thing that Dallas is famous for as well is sports, real sports town.
Yes, and Texas in general is a crazy sports state. Probably the South is big, but Texas is huge, especially for football.
Is it all? Because I know the Dallas Mavericks owned by Mark.
Yeah, I think there's some of that, but Texas is football country for sure. Really? High school, these stadiums for the college teams they rival NFL stadiums. They're absolutely massive. And I've driven past Cowboy Stadium. I mean, it is really impressive. But yeah, football is a thing down there for sure.
And high school football is huge, isn't it?
Huge, absolutely huge.
It's just great. It's so unimaginable because European sport and the way that players get fed into the leagues is so different. That high school sport is a thing in Europe. I mean, it's a thing in that people play.
Yeah.
You can't be a famous high school sports star.
Yeah.
That's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's just a different world.
It's a world to be honest, I don't even totally understand that because I love football and I love American sports, but I think some of the obsession with it can get kind of ridiculous and be put unfair expectations on kids, or they don't actually be able to be kids because they're just expected to be these sport heroes at such a young age. And I really wanted my kids, and I think you probably feel the same way, to be more well-rounded. Yeah,
it's not what I would choose at all. It's especially what they're learning about the damage that football does to your brain long term. It's not something that I would encourage kids to get involved in, but we've mentioned it lots of times. I do things that come with some risks, so I'm not one to talk, but I just think the chances of getting anything out of it are so slim, and the chances of completely destroying yourself with concussion or serious injury are so high that that equation just isn't worth it.
I think I'd like to be either a punter in the NFL, and I make a bunch of money and get to travel with the team, and then occasionally I kick a ball, and I really don't have much chance to get hurt, or a referee. I think those are kind of the two jobs to have.
Punter would be great. Although when you get hit as a punter, you really get hit because you fumble it or something, and then 10 players arrive at once. So
I just wouldn't fumble it.
No, true. Well, you don't make mistakes, so it'd be a lot easier for you than for some people.
I can't imagine anything I'd be worse at than trying to punt a football.
Yeah,
maybe throwing a football very far. I can throw a football okay. Can you throw a football being from England?
Well, I can throw a round football. That many.
Can you throw a pointy pigskin football?
Well, rugby was my sport, so I can throw it sideways. Can
you throw it like an American way forward pass?
No.
Okay. Next time we hang out, I'll teach you how to throw a football. I'll be your dad teaching you how to throw a football.
I actually have one in my little studio, and I'm looking at it right now.
Are you itching to throw it?
Not really. I don't know how, but I'm looking forward to the lesson. That'll be good. I mean, I'm like Trump. I've got small hands.
If you had to be a football player, would you be a tight end?
It's a good question, actually. I met a few tight ends in my life. I don't think football's a game for me. At 5'9", probably 155 pounds, soaking wet. So, not quite sure where I'd fit it. And I'm slow as well. I got no pace. So.
But you can run forever.
Yeah, that's true. If it was just a competition of who could cover 20 miles the fastest, I might be in with a shot. But probably leave the football to someone else. But
Yes.
we digress. I love digressing. I make no apologies for a good digression, especially when tight ends pop up.
Yeah.
So, Dallas. Any final observations on Dallas?
No, I actually would like to go back because there's things I haven't done. I'd like to do some of the museums, and I know there's some really nice shopping in Dallas, and try more food and stuff. But the Six Flags is really fun when I took my kids. Super fun.
And the other humongous city in Texas is Houston.
Houston is gigantic. It's actually the biggest country in the world. Now, I made you laugh because there's actually two false things. Number one, it's not a country, and number two, it's not the biggest city in the world either. But I just was trying to throw you off.
I mean, area-wise, it must be right up there as one of the biggest cities.
But
in North
it's
America.
huge. I think it is one of the biggest. It's absolutely huge. Now, I took my son to Houston last year, and we had a lot of fun. And the main reason we went there was to go to NASA.
Oh, yeah, that would be... I mean, I am a geek about the moon landings and anything space-related. That would be amazing. Is it all you hope it's going to be?
It's really cool. There's the big complex. There's one of the space shuttles you can go on and walk around. I think it's worth the trip, to be honest. There's a big museum. There's big rockets. They drive you around the complex. I was surprised that I came away feeling like NASA is underfunded. Yeah. Because it's still a working location, and it looks to me like most of it's like out of the 1970s. And when I was there, I was like, I can't believe how little we fund that, because it's just such a source of pride for us as Americans that we were the first on the moon, but besides that, I thought it was great and totally worth the trip if you're into astronomy.
What's Maine, Houston like? Because it seems like one of those North American cities where there are no geographical restrictions on how big it can get, so it's just sprawled.
It's just sprawled, and there's some great museums there. There's a really cool natural history museum with like one of the biggest collections of dinosaur bones in the country. There's an art museum that I thought was good. The aquarium was meh. I would skip that. But I think really, if you go, NASA's the main thing. And if you're going with kids, I would do NASA, and I would do the Natural History Museum to see all the dinosaur bones, and those are probably the two historic things. The zoo is pretty good.
Is there much to see just wandering downtown, or just...
No, and like you said, it's so sprawling that, and maybe there's some parts of downtown, but I didn't really see like some cool area of downtown that you'd really want to spend a lot of time wandering around. It's probably like LA or somewhere. It's just this big, huge area.
I mean, that was my takeaway from... I was in Toronto last week, as anyone who listened to the episode will know. That was my observation, that actually downtown is generally where the least cool things are.
Yeah. Denver is kind of that way too.
Downtown Denver. I remember the first time I came to Denver, I didn't know you, and I kind of wandered around and thought, God, Denver's not great. And then I came and stayed with you, and you took me to all the cool places, like, is it Colfax? Yeah. And all the cool parts. I suddenly realized that North American cities, the middle is not where the stuff is.
Not usually. I mean, I think maybe like New York it is.
Yeah, maybe.
But if you're in Denver and you go downtown, you'll just go to touristy places and maybe get robbed by a homeless person. Yeah, but you go out a little bit, there's all kinds of cool stuff.
Okay, so plenty to do in Houston, but yeah, downtown, not so much.
So we can talk about Austin. I was just there last week for about 5 days. Austin is not traditionally Texas, but it is really a cool place. It is the, like I said earlier, it's the one liberal spot in Texas. It's a college town. It's where University of Texas is. It is growing like crazy. They're building all kinds of skyscrapers and things there.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be one of the fastest growing cities in the US because people are moving there at a rate of knots because it's got that cool liberal feel, from what I understand, but it's not got California taxes.
Exactly. And then it's kind of interesting because when you go to the main drag where all like the bars and stuff are, when you're walking through it, it feels like you're in the French Quarter.
Oh, really? Well,
Like
the streets are small and
old buildings, just bars. Like you can tell there's been horrible things that have happened there. And I spent one evening down there. Lots of homeless people. It is very, like we use the term for Berlin, gritty. That part of Austin is very, very gritty. But then there's other parts of Austin that are very fancy and very wealthy. So I feel like you get different parts. Austin's very known for barbecue. There's some extremely historic barbecue restaurants there that where I think other parts of Texas have barbecue, but it's a lot more steak. Austin is really barbecue. Austin's also known for music. It's, kind of like Nashville would be. Now you would think that Austin is country music because it's in Texas, but it's really not. It's more blues and rock. And there are some country stuff and some country club, or country club sounds ridiculous, but it's like a club that plays country music, not a country club. But mostly it's not like the same kind of music you're going to get in like Dallas, where it's like hoot nannies and cowboy hats and stuff like that. That's really not an Austin thing. It's a little probably hipper than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as someone from Europe, when we say barbecue, we mean what you call grilling. We mean what you do in your back garden. What's barbecue like in Texas and Austin in particular?
Well, and to be fair, barbecue, the term barbecue, which is spelled in a bunch of different ways, has different meanings all over the United States. There's parts where if you say barbecue, it means, pork, and that's all it means. And I think in like North Carolina, if you say barbecue, it's pork. Brisket is brisket. They don't consider brisket barbecue. Other places they consider brisket barbecue. So it gets kind of confusing. But the barbecue in Austin is kind of a conglomeration of stuff where it's ribs, it's brisket, it's pork, and it is really, really good.
Is it the cooking or the sauce that make like what do they do? Smoke it?
They smoke it, but it depends, and that's another thing. What is barbecue? And it's so regional that there they smoke it. Some places use multiple different types of wood. Some places only use one type of wood. They smoke it for different temperatures and different times. They put rubs on it, or they dry smoke it, or they put a wet sauce on it before they smoke it, and then the sauces are different, and it just really varies, and it's very interesting going and trying these different places. And I only ended up going to one barbecue place when I was there because I was doing some other stuff, but I went to Stubbs Barbecue, which has a big concert venue in the back.
Oh, I got some Stubbs sauce not long ago.
Yes, and people...
Oh, good.
And their sauce is really good, and that's the place where the sauce comes from. That's the original restaurant, is right downtown Austin. So, yeah.
Oh, I actually reminded me at the end of grilling season last autumn, I ran out of Stubbs sauce, and I've been meaning to buy some because I think we're a couple of weeks away from our first kind of warm spell of weather here. So
yes,
you've reminded me.
Yeah, it's great. The barbecue was great. I stayed in 2 different hotels on that trip. The first time I stayed a little bit away from downtown, like not like you had to Uber or drive, but a pretty good walk from the really party downtown. And it was a beautiful area. The hotel was really nice. And then for the second part, I switched to the Hilton, which is literally like right next to the party area. And I would not recommend anybody do that. The hotel was nice, but at 9 o'clock until 2 in the morning, and I was on the 16th floor. unbelievably loud booming music from that party block came in, where literally it sounded like, like when you're in your house and somebody drives by with a really loud booming stereo and it's super irritating. It was like that for 5 hours. And it was that. You're
an early to bed, early up guy as well.
Oh, it was brutal. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm like, if I'm 16 stories up with my windows closed, they don't open, and it's this loud, like, how loud is it outside?
Oh, that's awful. You should have gone and joined them.
Oh, I'm just not that. But but the cool thing was right next to it, because there's some cool historic stuff in Austin. There's the only person who survived from the Alamo was a woman, and her house is right next to the Hilton. You can go tour it for free. And there's and O. Henry's house is right next to her house, and you tour that for free. O. Henry was a short story writer in the early part of the 20th century. So yeah, so I really have probably more to say on Austin because I just went there a week ago. The state capitol's there. You'd actually think the state capitol would be in Houston or Dallas, but it's in Austin. And the Capitol building's taller than the one in Washington, D.C., because, everything's bigger in Texas. And was actually designed by the same architect that did the one in Denver, which is neat. But you can tour that for free. Just walking around downtown Austin is really cool. It's just a neat place.
And you just mentioned there everything's bigger in Texas. If we just think about some general observations of Texas, is that true? Are the roads bigger? The trucks bigger? The beer's colder? Is it kind of America but more?
I think so. I think they take great pride in that. I think, they give big portions and just big everything, and they're, like you said at the start of this, they're just very proud of their state. And one of the things with their state is it's a big place and with big things, and
And speaking of everything being big, Texas has a reputation for having pretty sizable people. Is that something you notice?
Not really, but I was also in Austin, which is the hip part of Texas. And so it's going to be younger and people in better shape and more athletic. Now, you probably get that in Houston and Dallas more, but I didn't really notice it last week. But generally the South is heavier people, because Colorado is generally considered the thinnest state where I live. So you see it more down there for sure.
Yeah, I had a friend who was from Abilene, Texas, and he lives in France now, and he took his French girlfriend to Abilene, and she just could not believe it, because most people in France, in fact most people I guess in Europe, are generally in reasonable shape, and
yeah,
there aren't a lot of really plus size people, and she was pretty shocked by it in Texas. But he actually told me a quick story. They went into a grocery store and they're paying, and there was this huge fat lady behind the desk, and this French girl's paying, kind of having a little conversation, and the woman behind the counter goes, "Where are you from, honey?" And she said, "I am from France." And she's like, "France, Europe?" And this French girl goes, "Yes, France, Europe." And she goes, "I ain't never met anyone from France. Let me give you a hug." And she lifts up the counter and comes around and gives her a hug. And I thought, that just sounds great. That's the kind of place you want to travel.
Yes, and yeah, and people are very nice in the South. And I think this is a good segue that we should talk about something that's very important to both of us, and that's childhood obesity.
Yes.
And so if you want to talk about that.
It's a subject dear to my heart.
I love when I can say something, and I never know if you're going to edit it or not, because I don't want to listen to my own voice. So I
generally leave it in.
So I never really know what you're going to do. But I love when I say something and it just throws you off a little bit, and you just stare at me, and there's like this pause with a smile, and you really don't know what to say. So that just makes my heart feel so happy when I can pull that off.
But my background, for people listening to this, in the highly unlikely event that you haven't been to charliebosco.com, in the highly unlikely event you don't know this, my background is broadcasting, so you definitely get left field things said. People say something and you have to kind of salvage the situation live on air.
Yeah.
But they don't generally come out with things quite that random. So
well, you can't just say the score over and over because because a lot of your broadcasting is sporting events.
Yeah, just tell them. Hey,
so if I said something crazy, you'd be like, "Whoa, well, it's 2-0, and it's the ninth inning, and blah 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 blah," and you can't do that because there's no score.
No, exactly. But as I say, I'm kind of used to dealing with left field things, but they're all a little closer to the center than the things you throw at me. But I enjoy it. It's good practice. Well, my silence as well is normally me making a snap decision of do I edit this out or not.
Well, I'll leave that up to you.
I'm going to leave this one in.
The only time that I know that for sure is if I get a message from someone. They're like, I listen to your podcast, and I can't believe how many jokes you made about being peed on. and then I'm like, oh, Charlie left all those jokes in. That's really the only way I know.
I mean, there's also an element of laziness. You know, if we were to split the heavy lifting of editing these episodes, and maybe you can have some editorial input, but
I think I'm good with. I really trust you. You're the professional.
Flattery's going a long way here. The contrast to this broadcasting experience versus working at a Red Bull event is really quite staggering.
Do you think any of it, people can tell that you're a professional broadcaster and I'm just some random person riffing on things?
I very much doubt anyone can tell I'm a professional broadcaster.
Really?
I can't tell I'm a professional broadcaster. I get massive imposter syndrome sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, it's terrible. Awful. Yeah,
like,
I worked at a Red Bull event, and the camera pulls down, you're getting counted down. I was thinking, how am I the guy standing here with the microphone? It's just, you get terrible imposter syndrome.
Huh. Yeah. I don't...
Hey, speaking of my work, that's what we're talking about next week. My formal work.
Yes, and I've been bugging you about this from the get-go, and you're like, because I think it's super interesting. And we'll talk about it more next week, but you're a professional guide in some like really crazy places, and there's so few people that have that experience. Places that are like dream destinations, and I'm not talking about like, sitting on a beach somewhere, but actually like more adventure type stuff. I just think some of the stories you told me are really funny, and I just think it's fascinating, and I'm really excited for this next episode.
Yeah, my first career, I guess, have I had a career? Anyway, the first thing I ever did to get paid for was initially outdoor instructing, and then that led on to trekking guiding and then mountain guiding. So yeah, as you alluded to, I got to see some pretty nice parts of the world, albeit all of them really cold parts of the world.
Yeah.
And get paid for it. So we're going to talk about that next week, what it's like to be a guide, what the downsides are, and it's probably going to be slightly different from being a tour guide and someone that does city tours, but there's probably a lot of overlap as well. I suspect that whether you're cramponing up a glacier in the Himalayas or showing people the sights of Paris, you probably deal with a lot of the same issues, ridiculous as that sounds. So hopefully it's got some benefit for people that are thinking about guiding as a career or in some way being involved with the tourism and travel industry. So we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that. And the main thing I want to hear is about how awful people are.
You know what? 90% of people are great. 99%. And I don't have any real horror stories of people. Yeah, the nice thing about guiding is people are there because they want to have a good time. They're not looking for a bad experience. They're expecting a great experience, and they're happy and they're optimistic. So you're already off to a good start. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
That sounds like a boring episode. No one wants to hear about how happy everybody is. I want to hear about that crazy lady you told me about.
I got the crazy lady. I got lost on the summit of a peak in northern India, and the mist came down and we couldn't get off. We'll talk about that. I knew lots of people that got killed. I was trying to think of a subtle way of putting that, but I don't have a nice way to put it. Lots of people got killed, hurt myself a few times, had a few sketchy moments. So yeah, it won't be all positive, but I'm just saying.
Okay, good, because I don't want to hear a bunch of positive stuff.
You don't want to hear about beautiful sunrises.
No, nobody cares. I want to hear oh, I was a tour guide and this person was a monster and I pushed him off a cliff and then I never told anybody because I just couldn't deal with them anymore.
Yeah, I told you not to.
That's the kind of stuff people want to hear about.
Yeah, that's the stuff I told you. Got to edit this out. Right, anyway.
You won't edit it because it's too much work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you do it then.
So, anyways, back to the topic of childhood obesity.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, yeah, Texas, I think it's totally worth checking out. I think there's parts that are a destination. My ultimate recommendations would be NASA in Houston, Austin, just for the whole scene. If you're into music and you like that kind of stuff, but really, I think anywhere. And there's parts of I didn't even talk about South Padre Island, which is super famous. I think I'll just throw this in real fast. I think it's okay.
Okay, well that's nice.
South Padre Island's okay. It's not as awesome as people say. There's other places I'd probably rather go for a beach, but it's if you're down there, it's worth it. But there's a lot to explore in Texas, and it's really got a cool history. So
while you're down there,
yes.
On that note, I'm just looking at our time. We've done about 10 minutes of just jabbering about random nonsense, but hey, I'm going to leave it in.
That's the best 10 minutes.
I very much doubt anyone listening is thinking that, but I had a good time. We'll speak next week talking about all things guiding.
That sounds awesome.